Thank you, Tanya. Before I proceed with that, I just want to let you know that the live stream works well. Got a text message this morning from my daughter telling me to put the phone down. And also to pass a message on to somebody that will sit beside me to comb his hair. But I won't name any names. And that's not Tanya or I, so your guess is as good as mine. Okay, with that, I'd like to introduce the panel discussion. The group standards, inclusive education, University of Calgary. I want to invite Calvin Woods, Dr. Sana Nafa, Deline Lyons, Treaty 8, Dr. Jacqueline Ottoman, Dr. Dan Gerlich, Chris here? Dr. Sharon Friesen. Okay. Okay, we'll have University of Calgary start. Dr. Jackie Ottman.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to begin. Okay. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the territory that we're on, the Treaty 6 territory, and just feel really grateful to be in your presence, to share what University of Calgary is doing in the area of Indigenous education. As was said, I'm Jackie Ottman, originally from Fishing Lake First Nation in Saskatchewan. I'm an Anishinaabe. So I'm very happy to be here, really honored by everyone that is here. And just also would like to acknowledge the young man who's won the Royal Roads Scholarship, and that is truly just an accomplishment. And just the changes that he's going to create, not only in our spaces, but in international soil, is exciting. And again, someone who's just making way for other youth after him. So a while back, it's probably been a year ago or so, we started discussion with Treaty 8 executive, and we had the honor of them coming into our faculty, the Workland School of Education at the University of Calgary. And what we did at that time was talk about possibilities. And first of all, we began with by explaining and describing what the University of Calgary was doing, especially Workland School of Education. And I am associate professor at the University of Calgary, Workland School of Education. I've been there now for 11 years. And before that, I was a teacher. I got my B.Ed from the University of Calgary, my M.Ed and Ph.D. from the University of Saskatchewan. So I taught elementary school, I taught high school, did a short stint as a principal, and always felt that there was something more that I needed to learn in order to support Indigenous students and to create change in systems. And so that was exciting for me to have Dale Oasis and Kaya and Rose at our table last year when they were talking about whole system reform. It is something that I've been on board with ever since I became an educator, and it was exciting to hear such system-wide system-wide change and the progress that's already been made. The University of Calgary, as I said, I've been with the U of C now for 11 years, and my area of research is in leadership and policy, specifically researching First Nations leadership development. And that includes change and policy and program development. But I was essentially the sole First Nation professor, or associate professor there. And so something happened 2 years ago, and actually it began well beyond 2 years ago. But it must have been about 6 years ago. We got to come close. About 6 years ago, we had a new dean, and Dennis Sumara, and one of the things that he was interested in is strengthening Indigenous education, and but rather than just talking about it, he actually tied action to that intent. And so in one hire, he hired in one time he hired 5 Indigenous faculty. And that was, for University of Calgary, that was a bit of a precedent. And immediately, with now 6 Indigenous faculty, we began working together. And we created an undergraduate class and more in graduate level classes. And one of those classes is called Indigenous Histories, Education and Leadership. And that is a class that actually confronts or has pre-service teachers confront the challenges of education, including racism and discrimination. So we don't just prepare teachers for the knowledge base, the pedagogy of education, but we prepare them for the attitudes. We actually have them consider their values and belief systems. And so, when you have classes like that challenge not just superficial knowledge, but actually the core of that knowledge, then change slowly begins to happen within the institution, and that's been the process that we've been on. We've created an Indigenous Education Task Force, and I've co-chaired that with our Vice Dean Sharon Friesen, and came up with 10 recommendations for institutional change. So that is more than having just classes, but we're actually trying to change the whole culture and climate of our faculty to support Indigenous students and the future faculty. And another thing we've done is we had a symposium February of 2014 where we brought together different stakeholders. Industry was represented there, non-profit organizations were represented there, First Nations leaders, provincial and national leadership. And we asked 2 questions. What are the barriers in Indigenous education? And that was the morning discussion. And in the afternoon, we asked, what are the solutions? So we started talking about the possibilities. From that, we gathered data. We came up with, again, with more recommendations. So what we're doing now is actually, we're not just stopping there. With recommendations, there's action. So we're tying action items to those recommendations. And our senior leaderships, our associate deans, are going to be responsible for some of those action items, as will faculty. So again, there's that deep-seated institutional change that's happening, and it's being recognized in a much, outside our institution also. And the areas of focus that we would like to, we're focusing on are research. And we feel that research is very, very important in actually documenting the change that's happening and providing support for what's working and identifying, those working components. And another part is youth leadership. And developing leadership within our communities. And the third point is developing teachers, in-service and pre-service teachers. And one of those things that we are doing to develop teachers is actually moving outside of our faculty and bringing the learning to the community. And that is something called the community-based education program. And so my colleague here, Associate Dean Diane Garelick of our teacher prep program, will talk about the community-based education program that's already been in operation for a year.
I'm a stander, so I'm going to cause the ladies to work more, and that way I can get exercise after that delicious lunch. So let me just move to the front so I can come closer and be more intimate in this very large room. First of all, I want to thank you for being invited and to be a part of this conversation. We have been talking with elders over a number of years, particularly with some of the elders from Treaty 6, 7, and 8. And it's a conversation that we've been having not only with the elders, but with rural superintendents, with Alberta Education and Advanced Education. So over the next few minutes, I want to take you through the journey of talking about why we developed this community-based education program, why we think it's going to better support the needs of various communities across the province and the territories. And then I want to talk about a story that's emerging. And I have some voices of the students in some of the work, not only in terms of the community-based education program, but how we're changing the teaching philosophy to support, to empower all of our youth across the province. So I'm hoping that you become part of that story, and you'll see how the story is changing. So we're very excited. So I want to kind of talk you through this journey. So let me start here. Well, how did this begin? It's been over a number of years, and with Dean Samara that Jackie had spoke, he's a visionary, and it's nice to work with somebody who has fantastic ideas and wants to put things into action. In around about 2009, the Northern Alberta Economic Development Council put out a report saying we have problems. We're not attracting and recruiting teachers from rural areas. We're not attracting Aboriginal peoples into the communities to become teachers. We know that if we attract them from the rural areas, we see that they'll come to the urban centers, Lethbridge, Calgary, Edmonton, and then they often don't return back to your communities. So what you might find is a beginning teacher who needs their first job, stays for a year or two, and then finds something that's easier or better, or something that's within their comfort zone. And the Northern Alberta Economic Development Council said, we need to choose those people who are committed into their community. They know the students, they know their families, they know their traditions, and we want those people who are already committed to that community to become the future teachers. So that's part of it, and that's how the conversation started. Rural superintendents echoed the same thing. He said, we have phenomenal people in our communities, parents, volunteers, educational assistants, people who are working in administration, who we know would be fantastic teachers, but they can't come for a 4-year residency-based urban program. They can't afford it. They have to work. They have children. They have to look after their elderly parents. We know many of those are circumstances, incredible barriers, even within an hour's distance to any of the satellite campuses in Grand Prairie or Fort McMurray or Red Deer is still a problem if you're living 200 kilometers away from any of those satellite campuses. So this is the conversation in terms of how we set up the program. So who are we attracting to the community-based program? We're looking for those who can't commit to a residency-based program, who can't afford to move to the cities, or don't want to move to the cities, who can't spend 4 years of life and stop. We're looking for them to stay in your communities. So you are the mentors for those teachers. The principals who we've talked to, the elders who we've talked to, we want to be the mentors for the future teachers, not someone from the city who may not understand the nuances, the strengths of our community, the areas of resilience, the aspects of opportunities or possibilities. We need to be the mentors. And we'll help them grow and understand how we can move forward with our children. Part of the other thing is to see how we can gain the teaching experience. How can they do their field experience in those schools where there might be multiple classes, where there might be some resourcing issues, where you might be teaching online, where you might be having an elder teach them Indigenous languages and the traditions and the oral storytelling. And what we want to do is not for someone just to come in for 1 or 2 years. We want them to be there committed for a generation. We can't have the high turnover. We can never think long term if you're constantly having changes in your teaching staff every 2 years. You just need to have some stability in those communities. And who best are those who remain in your communities, who see the potential in your communities. So last year, after many, it was always exciting administrative and bureaucratic hurdles, we opened up our program 6 weeks before the deadline. And we got our first cohort, 18 students from across the province. You can see the areas here. It's not surprising that we're central and south since we're a southern institution. But we had many discussions with the Treaty 8 going into the communities. And we've had some initial conversations with some of the territories already. Well, we're not surprised with who we got. We had 18 individuals who signed up in July. We had 4 students who self-identified from Aboriginal peoples through the Aboriginal process. That's 25%, though that's kind of a skewed statistic when you only have 18. Majority are mature students, and we're not surprised that many people have incredible life experiences, professional experiences. Most, about 16 of the 18 individuals, were approached by a leader in their community. By a counselor or career college, by an elder, by an administrator, or by a rural superintendent. No one did this by themselves. Someone identified saying, you have the potential to be a fantastic teacher. And so you'll see the life experiences. When we first met these individuals in July, fantastic. They were already teachers in spirit. And just needed the certification and needed the rounding in terms of how to build capacity among those teachers. So let me show you a few of the students here. This is Charity One Spot. She's from Tsutsina community. She's a single parent. Works in the education department and they're on the reserve. And think, it's not as if it's very far from Calgary. Logistically, one could literally drive an hour and back. She goes, I'm a mother. I can't spend 2 hours a day driving there. And while Tsutsina is in relative proximity to Calgary, she says, I need to be in the community. I'm advising the next students, high school students, how to progress into the next levels. I can't leave that community. And so she's one of our wonderful fantastic students who are in our program, who sees the connection of her own work as a mother, as a counselor, and as a future teacher. And she was approached by somebody in her community saying, and you should become a certified teacher. I'm going to move to the next one because I'm going to talk about 2 other individuals. I always like to hear the voices of other people because I think it's interesting. And the first one is Marcia, who had started her degree, but given personal circumstances, her husband had to move to the rural area, and she had to leave her degree back 20 years ago. So this is Marcia. I'll just give you a quick clip here. And if the sound technicians, it was quite quiet when I did a test, if you just turn it up a little bit, will be a bit better to hear it.
Was lucky enough to get a job in my community right off the go, so I've had a great year working with an autistic little boy and learning a lot about a school environment. And so on the downside, I quickly realized that as much as I loved my job, I wasn't going to be able to provide what I needed for myself and my family off an educational assistant's salary.
Here's Angela, another single mother.
First impressions was the staff was way more accommodating and friendly than I ever expected. My last university experience 20 years ago was a little bit stiff, and so to see that these are mentors that I'd like to be around not only for this moment but for the next several years and keep in contact with in future. And it was also the first impression that if this is where education is going, because these are the leaders in their field, this is where I want to be.
What I like about it is there has been a palpable shift, I think, with the work in the School of Education, with many of the leaders like Jackie and others, in terms of the relational component, our understanding to the people and to the land. And so I think it does come out very clearly in terms of the approachability, the understanding this is a relation, that we work together as colleagues. And we always say to our pre-service teachers is, you are part of the profession, and you come together in our conversation as we move forward, not as if I know I am the knower of knowledge and I will bestow it upon you. They come to us as joining the conversation and furthering it further. All right, well, I want to move on, because I think it's interesting. They say, well, what's the difference? Because people commonly ask me, what is this from other programs that have focused on Aboriginal education or Indian education in the various provinces? This is where I think not only do we have the students staying in the communities for the majority of the time, they come on for a 2-week residency-based program in the summer. We have a very clear support system for student experiences, for field experiences. We have community partners in the communities, of which many of you may be asked in the next coming years to be mentors for these students. But what's also interesting, and the aspect's not just about place, but it's the integration of Indigenous perspectives. And it's been a very interesting journey, because the Bachelor of Education program at the University of Calgary was fundamentally reconceptualized in 2011. And we keep on saying, and when Jackie was first charged with taking the Indigenous History Educational Leadership course, we got significant pushback from our students. It was too political, it was too emotional. Our majority of our students say, it's not my problem, and significant problems. So over the years, we're saying it's entering into a conversation, and we see it at different points. So for instance, our very first semester in Literacy, Language, Culture, a fundamental component of our program is talking about oral tradition and storytelling. The fundamental aspects of literacy, not marginalized, not as an aside, not as something as a dual language part, but fundamental. We're not talking at the political level yet here, but starting to understand how Indigenous ways of knowing are already part of it, and to make it explicit. The second semester, we enter into the discussion with the Diversity and Learning course, in terms of not diverse range of cognitive or emotional behavioral, just diverse range of students that come to us. And it's this part where we enter into a much more political conversation. Where are your biases and prejudices that you might have as a student? And we don't go fundamentally, the entire course is not about the FMI history, education, leadership, but just starting to think about your prejudices. So some, on one example is a student says, I don't think rural drama can be taught in rural schools. So she went out to a rural community and said, fundamentally changed my understanding about the robust notions of drama. Something as simple as that. A Jewish person going to a mosque. We have a significant number of students, non-Indigenous students, who have now taken up the saying, what does it mean to support Indigenous youth? I'm just going to read you a paragraph here. This is Mike, he's in 5 weeks. He went to Tsutsina. I entered Tsutsina Nation with superficial knowledge of the tragic injustices inflicted upon the Ethnomai populations in the form of land annexation, residential schooling, and cultural genocide. In doing some research, I recognized that a long history of oppression could potentially make for some very awkward and uncomfortable situations during my stay on the reserve. Yet, I truly felt that if this were to happen, I would feel okay about it, be absolved of any negative association, because none of it was actually my fault, right? Essentially, being assuredly not a racist had somehow vindicated my attitude of impartiality with regards to coming onto the reserve and selflessly teaching the Indigenous children the Alberta Education Program of Studies. Now, after 5 weeks and just 15 hours exposure of mandated curriculum in an Indigenous context, I have learned that my supposed independence for the matters of Indigenous oppression is merely a false pretense for my internalized dominance. I feel responsible for that ignorance and learn that the hegemony imposed by European ideology, the culture with which I personally identify, is still very much in action, albeit achieved through conditioning rather than an overt force or intimidation. This is a first-year student in the program for 5 months. But let me show you something else, because I think there's something about place. Again, in our very first semester of our community-based program, one of the things we say, we don't want to make this program the poor cousin. We need to understand is how do we make some of the key components of the principles that guide our Bachelor of Education program relevant, both for urban and rural, Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. So this one, it's a basic course that is a fundamental course, learning about different learning theories that have formed various discourses over the years of how we think about learning and teaching. And their task is to see where they fit along that spectrum of different learning theories. It's a very theoretical course, and people kind of groan when they first see the title. But the task for here was a visual representation of how the learning theory informs their aspect of place. So let me show this student's work. And this student finished this 8 weeks within just starting the program.
Roads. There are many types of roads. Some are busy and congested. Some are quiet and peaceful. Some are seemingly impossible. Some are in the country, others in the city. All over the world, there are roads. Roads to me are a metaphor for systemic sustainability education. Systemic sustainability education embraces all of the other moments: the straight and narrow of standardized education, the constructive theory of authentic education, the focus on participation and inclusion in democratic citizenship education. Systemic sustainability education does not tear down or ignore the other moments, but rather includes and expands on them, embracing the ever-changing nature of education, viewing it as a complex web beyond ourselves, intertwined with culture and nature. This is the main road into my community. It may look pretty simple, but is one small part of a complex system of roads that can take you anywhere. In my community, systemic sustainability is seen in select teachers who attempt to extend students' awareness of their world. It is seen in this visual response assignment. It is seen in the quiet act of placing France's flag in the lobby in response to the recent terrorist attacks. It is seen in the many trips that are organized by the school: band trips to Spain, history trips to Vimy Ridge, conservation trips to Costa Rica. It is seen in the humanitarian trips to Peru, to an orphanage in which students were so affected by what they witnessed that they came home, raised money, and returned to build a new bathroom for this orphanage. Not all students can travel, but the importance of seeing beyond your own surroundings is still shown on the classroom walls. The teachers in my community have, as the closing words of engaging mind states, an ethical responsibility to look beyond themselves, to be aware of and challenge their subjects and objects of their consciousness, so that their students see that this road leads to all other roads.
So that student had only been in our program for 8 weeks, and already is starting to think about what she's learning, how it might impact her community, her place, her people. I'll let you read that out while I'm chatting. In terms of some of the other assignments that we have, and Jackie can speak more to this course as she has been a phenomenal leader in terms of changing the teaching ethos among Indigenous peoples and for Indigenous peoples. One of the things I've noticed, and this is where the story emerges, because I think there's lots of incredible openings for us to move forward together. What's noticeable is when I first took up the portfolio as Associate Dean in the last few years, we used to always get at least 20 students saying, I don't want to talk about this, and they would do kind of body language. I don't want to talk about this, I feel victimized as the white person. And that was a common response, a visceral reaction. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't get one student saying that to me. In fact, when I talked to Yvonne Fletcher-Pratt, who's been doing service learning in the various communities, she's saying, we have 20 people already going into communities, not as saviors, but working with and together with the various elders. We see our brightest, most phenomenal graduates who have a PhD in music, who again are our leaders and our scholars, like Billy Wright, who are saying, I want to be in those communities, not for a year or two, but I am committed to the endeavor. So we're seeing our graduate students changing the ethos of current teachers who are still struggling with how to think about indigeneity in their classrooms for an inclusive environment. We're seeing this shift now, both within the city, and we're increasingly seeing it in our rural communities. So, as I talk, I get faster because I'm so excited by this program. We have, when we talk about our Indigenous course, we have 10 Indigenous scholars now at the Workman School of Education who are all committed to this endeavor. So I'm going to stop here. I'm very excited by the program. There are 2 programs. It's a 4-year. We've also found that many people had a bachelor's degree already. And so we've now added, due to the requests that we received, for a 2-year after degree. We also have found that many students, we had many with some of the elders coming saying we have 20 students. And while some students still needed to get the progression in order to make the achievement, we're working together with the Native Center at the University of Calgary to help with the progression, to understand that, to make it accessible. And we have come out to communities to talk through the process of registering in partnership with your communities. So I'm going to stop here and let Sharon kind of give the last word in terms of some of the incredible opportunities that I'm so privileged to be a part of. So I know I've met a few of you today and in previous conversations. I hope to meet more of you in the coming days. So thank you very much.
Thank you. In just a moment. It's good to see a number of you who I've met in at various gatherings before. To the chief, to the elders first, to this land upon which I've been invited today. Really privileged to be here as a representative of the University of Calgary. Thank you so much. We really look forward to working with you. Heard very clearly what was stated this morning. Dale and I have had conversations, and a number of others from Treaty 8 education in our meetings with you. We're really encouraged to work with you to create something new, and are really privileged to be partnering with you. I think there's some things you heard that we're starting to do the work on ourselves first, and then if we can continue to work as allies with you, would really like to do our part in helping you to create that education system for the children in the Treaty 8 nations. Looking forward to being part of the next 3 days with you.
One other thing, Candace has a sheet describing the community-based education program at that table over there, so you can grab it, grab that when you have time. And we will be here in the next couple days if you have questions regarding not only the community-based program, but also other programs. We're happy to say that we have 40 Indigenous graduate students, those are First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students that are in our master's and PhD programs. So that's exciting for all of us. Thank you, Miigwech.
Thank you, UFC folks. I wanted to kind of tie this up together with what are we doing with these people. What we're trying to do is we want to create a cohort. The cohort basically is to give us an opportunity to try to set some direction in terms of their current programming. We want to take over their program. But if we can get 30 students from the Treaty 8 area, we can have our own cohort. What the cohort means is we can begin to shape a program that really benefits our needs. Working with the University of Lethbridge folks, and one of the things our principals were able to do was they came up with a evaluation tool to evaluate our schools. To date, we have 9 of our Treaty 8 schools who have been evaluated by the same tool and process. That means now we've started to collect some data, some information. One of the things that comes, for example, from this data, it's saying our schools, there's a big issue. And that issue has already been mentioned, but I don't know if it's been really clearly identified. Our issue is our schools' turnover of staff. That's the issue. We're never going to get ahead if we teachers keep changing, principals keep changing, everything keeps changing. So one of the tasks we've had, that the Commission had, and the Education Director, local education directors had, because we've had an opportunity to meet with these folks on a regular basis. And one of the directions they came up with was, well, let's look at that. What can we do about that? And as Carmen said from the University of Lethbridge, he says, Dale, you really got to nip this in the butt because you're never going to get ahead. And so within that, we're starting to think, we've got another group of people, which is what Eileen is going to be presenting on. They came up with another piece of work we're looking at as a model of an approach on what we could be doing in our schools, in our communities, to better the outcomes of education. Part of that is trying to create, looking at this, what do we need to stabilize our communities, stabilize our students, stabilize our classrooms, stabilize our schools, to stabilize our homes. In the school, we figure the stabilizers are the folks that are in the community. There are teachers' assistants, there are janitors, there are receptionists, they're the people who are working in the school. We're hoping to reach out to that population and say, is there something we can do with them to help stabilize the classroom, the school, therefore the student? To do that, we have to change the program that they're suggesting to help us create the capacity and that teacher that we're looking for to teach in our schools. So the magic number U of C have given us is 30 students. That's what it's going to take for us to be able to have that kind of, so we can have input into the program. So I'm hoping we're going to be doing a campaign here fairly shortly, trying to recruit that many students. So you're going to be seeing more of us, you're going to be hearing more of us on that front. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion and where are we going to go with this. We've also got U of C involved in the other piece of work, which is basically doing the research around the model that we're creating towards this inclusive education, or education being more inclusive of the students that we're working with. And that's the model or presentation Eileen is going to be sharing with us later. But this is to kind of give you an update in terms of what are we doing. So we're looking at definitely some things that we've done in terms of a common evaluation tool for our schools. We also have a teacher's administrative toolkit that is ready that we want to publish and give back to our principals. And the principals, the current principals have been working on that. That's ready for publication. That's something else. Some of the provincial school principals have seen this book, this resource, and they want to get their hands on it. So there's a lot of interesting developments that we're doing. We've also gone down the road of starting to look at some of the standards of what kind of standards should our teachers have if they're going to start teaching in our schools with our program of studies. So all this work kind of ties into that development in terms of where are we heading. So I just wanted to add that, and I believe Chair says they want to open it up for questions if there are any.
While we're waiting, just wanted to inform you that through live stream, there's schools getting involved. They want some acknowledgement. Athabasca Delta Community School from Fort Chip. The student is there. The teacher, my sister Helena Wells, his class is participating, and they just wanted to say hi, and I'm saying hi for them and saying hi back to them. So thank you for that.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Esther Drew. I'm a teacher and at the Swanger First Nation School. I'm seconded to Swanger School to teach the Cree language and culture at the school. My question is, I'm from the Lesser Slave Lake area in northern Alberta. And we have an ATEP program there that's being delivered through the U of A. My question is, how are you different from that program that's already in our area?
I think there's a couple distinctions. One is for some people they are still unable to go to the satellite campuses, and so staying completely in the reserves or on the communities in any rural area. So we have some very remote students who are entering our program where some of the other programs are unable to serve. I think more importantly though, I think given the numbers of Indigenous scholars that are leading the community-based program and the Indigenous History and Education Leadership. What's common, I'm going to argue this, I think it would be a different panel discussion in terms of debate, where I think other education programs have fallen down in two ways. One is in the urban-based components of the program. The second one is what I call the tick box feature. So long as we teach Indigenous perspectives at one point as a course, we've done our job. And we can say, yes, we've met the Alberta Education Mandate, we've met the Canadian Ministers of Education mandate in order to integrate Indigenous ways of knowing. This program is purposely, what we do is a through line in multiple aspects. One of them is Indigenous perspectives, is in every single course. There is a key component that I can identify in every course that builds so that people's philosophy of teaching changes, both for people in Indigenous communities and people who need to serve Indigenous youth in multiple capacities. And that change in ethos, when we have talked, and we spoke to, Dr. Fries and I spoke to a superintendent with one of the Calgary jurisdictions yesterday, they're saying our present teachers recognize that we need to address Indigenous ways of knowing. We don't know how to do it. We don't know how to change the ethos of teaching. What's exciting is our pre-service teachers we're starting to finally see that the way they think about entering the classroom is fundamentally shifting. And that's what's exciting, because we're starting to do the research that we haven't seen where many teacher education programs have been trying in multiple ways. Because there's a scope and scaffolding with Indigenous perspectives throughout every single course throughout the program, that's much more empowering in terms of how it's manageable, what's possible, how that will amplify and extend what we already do. That's what I think is different.
Okay, my other question. What is the criteria for entrance into your program? And also, are you saying that's a satellite program, it's an online program? Because in a lot of our communities, there's difficulty with the internet and things like that, where we're from.
Yeah, it's a blended program where they come onto campus for 2 weeks in the summer. They do all of their field experiences in their local communities, and they do online courses. So connectivity, the University of Calgary Workland School of Education in the graduate programs has been doing versions of online programs for over 15 years as a social work at the University of Calgary with many of the rural communities. They're very attentive to to connectivity issues, and so there are clear supports to ensure that where there is limited connectivity, you're still able to connect. And so that's one of the things that has been addressed quite well, I think, in the programs, given that you're not requiring a large internet. It does mean going into for some, we do know that there's still valleys where people have connectivity issues. It means going into the public schools and the institutions. So that one is one that we keep on trying to address, but that each year it gets easier in that respect.
And you're talking about the language and culture and our ways of knowing and ways of being. How do you teach that online? That's my question.
Well, I think there are multiple ways. I don't want to go into the minutia, but I think when we talk there are some interesting. So, for instance, that visual response, what we call a notion of flipping the classroom. So you're doing the readings, and what you're doing is creating circles of discussion. So when you say, what does literacy mean to you in your community? And you are to provide do a response by going into a school that's combined with your school experience and saying, what are the literary traditions? Part of it is for them to actually be attentive to what traditions already occur within their schools, and where you might want to expand upon those traditions. Or the notion of place and the learning theories, as we saw in Catherine's presentation of roads. How does place come into it? I'll let Jackie, because Jackie spent a lot of time in the graduate programs as well in an online capacity.
Yes, I've actually been teaching online for probably 10 out of the 11 years, and that's just, one of the forms that I teach in. And, connectivity is something that I think has improved over the years, and just, we have just a very supportive technical staff that's actually with us during our classes, and if something goes down, they're dealing with the student themselves directly behind the scenes. So we have that support there, and we understand again the challenges in rural communities and in First Nation communities with connectivity. And in terms of the First Nations, whether it's Métis and Inuit portions of knowledges and cultural learning, as was stated, I actually coordinated the program, our FNMI Indigenous History, Leadership, and Education course, and we came together as a group, and we struggled and we worked through creating that syllabus and outline, which is meant to be very inclusive of the various perspectives in a general sense. And so the assignments that are in that particular course are geared towards the students looking at their local community. And so, there's the general readings about First Nations, Métis, or Inuit perspectives, but then we're also asking students to look into their community and to actually draw some of that information from their elders, from the local teachers. And so, for instance, one of the assignments that was a student that did the roads assignment is what we call the photo voice assignment. And, you know, this is done in an urban setting, but, you know, that particular assignment can also be done online because I've done it online with graduate students.
That's not my side.
Oh, that was an online assignment. So basically we ask the students to look for indigeneity within their locale, within their place, and to take a camera and to take pictures and to ask people and to ask themselves the significance of the land and the people to that place and space. So, you know, there are readings, but the assignments tie those readings and the discussions back to their location. And so we try to make the assignments very interactive and meaningful for the students. Because we understand that, you know, there's so much diversity within our Indigenous populations that it has to be that way, right? The readings have to be connected to the person in one way or another.
Thank you.
We have 45 minutes for 2 more presenters. So one more question, and if you want to maybe take the time, if you want to, ladies, are going to be around for a bit, or maybe you can ask the questions so we can move on to the next presenters after this lady that's standing up.
Hi there. Thank you. My name is Michelle Willier. I'm from the Second Creek First Nation. I'm wondering, do you offer Cree lessons in your curriculum so that we could teach our students our language? Because of course, as everybody knows, we've lost our language along the way. And I find we don't have our own school, so we have to work with public schools. And I've spoken to our public schools, and we don't have teachers, qualified teachers, who can teach the Cree language, so we can't incorporate it in our public schools. And I find that if we have a partnership with our public schools, we should be having educated teachers who can teach our language right in our schools, you know, with Catholic schools, private schools, but we should be able to do that. And what I'm hoping is that your program would offer Cree lessons or the Dene language, our own languages in our own territories.
That is something that we've recognized, you know, for a long time. And I think that was one of the reasons that this particular program just emerged, is because we recognize that there are so many knowledge keepers and people who have so much ability and capability to be teachers in the classroom. And, you know, that includes our language teachers, right, who do sometimes all of the work, but they don't get recognized, you know, to the same capacity as someone with a BEd. So, you know, we would like to draw those teacher assistants, the language instructors, and you know, hopefully support them through this process to get recognized, and you know, for that particular ability, which is language. And that's something that I recognize and know is very important to our people. And again, because of the complexity and the diversity of our people, then, you know, it's not just one language that you would have to offer, as you indicated, right? So it's got to be that local language offering. And Diane's also going to speak to this.
Yeah. It is a challenge because of the diversity of languages, but it's not unique to the Aboriginal peoples. Same thing in Chinese and a number of other languages. And so where people have a fluency of Cree or other languages, we have second language offerings in terms of how one teaches language in the process. And so part of it is you need to look at your partnering faculty in terms of languages and linguistics departments to see if they can provide. And so as the Workman School of Education is leading the way in Indigenous scholars, so is the Faculty of Arts now building their capacity in many ways. And so what we're seeing is where we can build capacity for language. And so when we have courses offered in a particular language with the respective partnering faculty, we can include them within the languages. within the second languages teachable subject area is what we would call it. So looking at multiple languages, how do you teach well your particular language in the classroom? So the window of opportunity is there, but part of it is building the infrastructure or thinking creatively, and I think that's part of some of the generative discussions that we need to think about is how can we recognize one's fluency in a language so they can come into the program already to build in terms of how they would teach, for instance, Cree well to their students so that the traditions continue on as we would do in Mandarin or Russian or Pakistani. So so I think there's a window, but we still need to build capacity in that area.
Thank you. We'll take two more questions or comments from the elder and also final one from the chief.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentations, both of you. I have one question regarding the, we've just been blessed with the TRC reconciliation, and the UN declaration is accredited as part of the solution for what we want, direction we're heading. I'm wondering, would either one of those two topics be included in the curriculum so the students could get credited to include their degree, the ones that want to teach in reserves in our communities? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I was actually at the TRC closing ceremonies in Ottawa at the beginning of June, and to have followed it. Actually, the TRC has been, the whole process up until the closing and the recommendations has been a part of that mandatory class. That means that all of our students, all of our BS students have to take this particular class on Indigenous perspectives. It's mandatory. And that's part of the reason that there is so much pushback in the very beginning, because students were saying, again, these are non-Indigenous students saying, you know, why do we have to segregate a class or have one class devoted to Indigenous perspectives? You know, why are we doing that? And but you know, things have progressed and changed, and so the TRC, the UN Declaration, rights on Indigenous people, that is a part of that course. So the teachings are there, and so this last fall, the recommendations, we also explored the recommendations, but not only contained to that class. We're also talking about it at an administrative level, and you know, how are we as a faculty going to meet the recommendations outlined in the TRC? And as a whole campus, you know, beginning fairly soon, we have an Indigenous strategy. So it's not only our little faculty of education that's going to undergo systemic change, it's all of our university is going to be committed to this kind of change.
Yeah, thanks. Just a comment on the language teaching. Perhaps maybe when you do your recruitment of the next cohort, you'd have fluent speakers that would be teachers. I mean, that's one way of solving it real fast. My question is, as you're going through your program, I haven't had the opportunity to look at your program studies, but do you have an outdoor teaching component there? Because we find that some of the programs that we've been doing, we've been experimenting with our schools, is that the outdoor programs are save the schools, I think, in some ways. But then we need teachers to be able to do that, because a lot of the time teachers are very reluctant to be able to do that.
So as we do what we call this as a bold initiative with our community-based, one of the key, we have numerous initiatives, because it's a holistic aspect in terms of reforming the way we think about teaching practices more generally. So we have a comprehensive school health plan that is mandated, and we give a 5-day workshop in terms of mental health outdoor. One of the key issues, and if you go to the workland.ucalgary.eca site, you'll see a section called Out and About. Because again, as I talked about mapping out where we do Indigenous ways of knowing, I'm also looking, saying we need to be out of the classrooms. We know that engaged, robust, rich learning where students are gravitated occurs outside. So you'll see numerous points in our program where we're starting to increasingly implement. So for the science, technology, engineering, math course, we send them out to Kananaskis, to the field stations. We see that our students are going out to Camp Chief Hector. We see them in multiple ways saying, you should not be sitting in the classroom. How do you get your students to be excited and learning, understanding? So Yvonne Poitras-Pratt and Mike Licker in the Indigenous Perspectives course said, let's get the students out of their classroom, and they did, outdoor-placed education. So you can see, these are just a few illustrative examples, but this year, because we now have a very strong Indigenous ways of knowing, we're now starting to put the place-based portion in, and I'm challenging my colleagues, saying there's opportunities for you to go and engage with various community organizations, with the people, in various capacities in outdoors. And so if you want to see some of the recent initiatives in the last 6 months at the Workman School of Education, just go to the Out and About, and you can see the pictures, you can see the engagement of the students in multiple settings that address cognitive needs, mental health issues, diversity needs, Indigenous ways of knowing, place-based education. So we are adding that every step of the way, because we're never satisfied. We're thinking there's another element, and we see the changes again in our students going, oh, now we understand what it means.
Okay, yeah, that sounds very, very good. However, unless the driving force is Indigenous educational philosophy versus Western educational philosophy, then we're going to be spinning our gears again. Because after a while, the novelty will wear off, and we'll get stuck back into just teaching Western educational philosophy. So we have to embrace this part. We have to do this part.
It's both,
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Blend the two.
So true, and I think that's, if you look at the program, it is based on Indigenous, there's a portion there on Indigenous philosophies, epistemologies, and ontologies. And so, what are some of those common philosophies that we share? And one of them might be all my relations, right? Just all of the interconnectedness of creation and cosmos, and humanity to creation. And so that is something that we introduce to the students, and we encourage them to ask, whether they end up in a First Nation community, ask the people in the community about those knowledges in a respectful way, again, implementing appropriate protocols. So again, I think, some of the things from my perspective, I can't speak for Diane, but, all of this is identified as innovation, but I see it as actually moving back into indigenous knowledges. We're actually, in the systems like Alberta Ed, some of the things that they're doing in terms of wraparound education, experiential education, those are our ways of, that's our Indigenous pedagogies, right? And so part of it is claiming it and saying, hey, I recognize that. That's not anything so new. My Kukum taught me that, or I heard that in my community. So it's saying, it's claiming some of those and having other non-Indigenous people recognize the contributions that we have made and can make to education.
We're just checking with other presenters that we may have push one item back to tomorrow, but we're going to have that confirmed, and there's a lot of good discussions going on. We have an elder that's probably his arms tired up there waving. It's hard for me to say no, so I want to give him that opportunity to have an input. So with that, can we move on to the next presenters after that, please? So so we can, we have two more.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing me. I came from a school. My name is Bill Shoemaker. I've been teaching for 28 years in First Nation schools. My wife and I retired 2 years ago. By the way, my birthday is coming up next month, February 29th. I'll be 18 years old. Oh, it'll be able to go to the bar. 18 years old. Anyway, right now I teach up in a little place called Lake School. And I teach grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in one classroom. So it's exciting to be there with them because I speak Cree. I've been moving around different areas in Northern Alberta and PDA. My wife and I are both teachers. My 11 years I spent in residential school. So it's good for me to be there looking at how we can change the curriculum for First Nation schools. I know for a fact that a lot of us survivors have lost a lot of our culture and trying to go back to it. And yet, many of us have survived and through a lot of pressure, through a lot of turmoil in our lives, but we survived. Today we talk about how things were a long time ago before I went to residential school, how beautiful it was to be taught in our language or culture, and then all of a sudden residential school came along and everything was shattered. It was devastating for our families, devastating for us, to go through that turmoil. I saw it when I came over there after 11 years because I was taken away at an early age. When I saw my mom wasn't my mom anymore. It was another woman. I lost that bond and I didn't realize it. So when she passed away about 15 years ago, I couldn't cry, because I didn't know how to cry. First year, we cried and cried. Second year, the tears disappeared. Because we were so cold, nobody there to hug us, And so I just wanted to make that known. But one of the things I wanted to ask is where do and how do we, the teachers, apply? What criteria are you looking at, for your school program? I never heard of it, maybe because I'm in isolated communication most of the time. So that's my question. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your story. There's just a lot of stories, very similar to yours, and they are very heart-wrenching. My grandfather grew up in residential school also, and he came home finally when he was 18, so he stayed there, well beyond the mandated time. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges I think that we've experienced in terms of the schooling experience, because education is something different. I see some education as something different. Schooling is structured, and education is more pervasive. It continues beyond the school and includes many people. And as Dr. not Leroy Lilbear, but Dr. Gregory Gahete says, education in his language, actually in some of the languages in the South, translates to coming to know. And so, that really means many things. right? It's coming to know ourselves, coming to know each other, coming to know our environment. And that's a lifetime process, right? And so I think it's always, we use Dr. Smith's framework, and she's an Indigenous scholar from Maori. She's Maori Indigenous scholar from New Zealand. And like the whole goal of education from her perspective is to reach self-determination. And to get to self-determination, you have to move from survival mode to healing to transformation. And then, she has a lot of, there's a lot of other factors to that particular model. But we realize that there has to be mobilization, and that's what's happening here today. And there has to be healing, a part of the whole education process. And so that is something that, we move not only ourselves through, but the students. As Dr. Friesen said, one of the first things that we had to do as an institution in order to be committed to Indigenous education is we had to look at ourselves as an institution. What were we doing wrong? What were we doing right? And so this is the community-based program is one of those things that emerged, and how can we do things even better? And in terms of the criteria, Dan will talk to that.
Well, there are 4 areas that we currently provide for the community-based: English, mathematics, science, and social studies. Depending on which area that you want to specialize in as a teachable subject area, will have different criteria. I know that there's a breakout session tomorrow afternoon, and there are different qualifications. With all of them, for instance, requiring English 30 is the one that is standard for post-secondary institutions. If you want to find out more about our program, again, Jackie said there's brochures on the side and resources. You can go to workland.ucalgary.ca and go to the website. The application is like any post-secondary institution. You can apply online through the online system. We do have a dedicated staff in our undergraduate programs, and as Dale was saying, if there's a number of students that in your community who are interested and think could apply, we have sent out advisors to the communities to help them through the process so it's not so daunting, and that we can support you if they are missing your criteria this year, how to help them next year. Or in terms of looking at various options into our program, such as the Aboriginal applications process, which have certain ways in which to support Aboriginal peoples, or the diverse qualifications in terms of you're a mature student or have extenuating circumstances. So it's not an easy answer because there are 4 areas of study and they have different criteria. But we do have a number of ways in which you can find out more information, and I know that there's a breakout session tomorrow to discuss the details of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, presenters of University of Calgary, Dr. Jackie Ottman, Dr. Diane Gerlich, and Dr. Sharon Friesen. Safe travels home. Dr. Gerlich, thank you for being here with us. And Dr. Jackie Ottman and Dr. Sharon Friesen are going to be here a little longer, so if you have any questions or further comments to them, they'll be available. We have 2 more presenters. I'd like to maybe take a 15-minute break before that, so that we've been sitting here for quite a bit, so let's get some, get on our feet and stretch and get coffee, and we'll start again in 15 minutes. Thank you.